into the net by Kylian Mbappé.
Oh, Benyetta, beautifully done.
Cornet finds Dembele. The first touch is good. The second is deadly.
Neymar still. Oh my word, what a goal.
Golovin. Lovely finish. Ajax delivery. Guendouzi's header. Here's an opportunity. Sanchez. Outrageous goal from Gael Kakuta. Play it again. And Marseille have the points.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of Le Beau Jeu, the official Ligue 1 Uber Eats podcast in English. And tonight, or this morning, or this afternoon, wherever you are, including the panelists, we are making history because for the first time in the 5-year history of Le Beau Jeu, we are bringing you an episode from the middle of an international break. Now that doesn't make it all that simple because we have to cast our minds back and think what happened already in round 8 of the Ligue 1 season. But one thing I can promise you is that today we're going to keep it short. Now, I did promise this last time out. We went for an all-time record length. But we'll still have all the good bits. Luke Entwistle is going to tell us all about Monaco's latest youth academy talent. Who needs Elias Ben-Seguir when you've got Maghnes Akliouche? Jonathan Johnson is going to tell you everything you ever wanted to know and more about promoted Le Havre, including their coach, Luka Elsner, who are giving a very good account of themselves so far on their return to the top flight. And of course, Professor Andreas Evagora is here for our history lesson. He's taking us back to when Montpellier stunned Carlo Ancelotti et al. To win the most amazing Ligue 1 title upset in recent history. But we're going to start with a quick look back at the round that was 10 days ago now. And the Côte d'Azur is still the place to be, with Monaco and Nice first and second, Paris Saint-Germain sitting menacingly in third. Marseille got back to winning ways, but you can't say the same for Olympique Lyonnais, still without a win. You can catch all the conversation every day of the week about Ligue 1 on Twitter, or X as it's now known, at Ligue1_ENG for English. And of course, like, subscribe, follow and recommend Le Beau Jeu on all your podcast platforms. And of course, there's all the news, interviews, videos, highlights and everything else you need on ligue1.com. Okay, well, look, we're going to go straight into the action and we'll do the introductions as we go. So we're looking back at round 8 of the season, a round that sees Monaco still in top spot. A great 3-1 win over Reims, Ismail Jakobs with his first Monaco goal and an assist for Wissam Ben Yedder, who hit his 5th of the season to go second on the scorers charts. He's always there or thereabouts. And Folarin Balogun scored against his former club, of course, which meant the hands up, no celebration goal when you're obviously happy to have scored, but you're not allowed to show it. They stay 1 point clear at the top over second place Nice. Luke, you're the man on the Côte d'Azur, so tell us, Monaco, can they keep this up? And the same question pretty much for Nice, sitting there in second.
I mean, it's funny you mentioned the Folarin Balogun celebration and the fact that he obviously held his hands up, but does it really count if you've got such a beaming smile on your face? He was clearly absolutely loving it. But no, he's obviously hit the ground running. Wissam Ben Yedder is still scoring, and I think you look at their attack and you say that if their attack can keep being as potent as it currently is, and has been since the start of the season, then there is hope that this can continue. I think that Monaco, the issues are further back. They have been since the start of the season. They were towards the end of last season, and it doesn't look like it's getting any better, I think it's fair to say. And for this upcoming round of fixtures, it looks like they're going to be losing a few more members of that defence as well, with suspensions, injuries. And when the Africa Cup of Nations comes up, they're going to lose also some more players in that region. So I think the case is, can Monaco just basically keep outscoring their opponents? Because, I mean, that is football. That is the aim of football. But basically, they are not going to be keeping too many clean sheets, it feels, this season. So it's, can their attackers keep being prolific and keep scoring? I think that's the case. And then when it comes to Nice, Nice is actually the complete opposite problem, where you've got a very, very solid defence, as they had last season, as they also did under Christophe Galtier. They've had for many years a very solid defence and a very, defensive mindset, and I think it's getting out of that and getting used to what Farioli, who's asking them to be a little more expansive, getting used to those demands. And I think you're seeing mixed results. I think against teams that do want to play, against teams that want to press and want to also score themselves, I think you're seeing these play very, very well. Obviously, PSG and Monaco are the obvious examples, and against sides like Brest, who, are right up there as well, but who themselves, their aim is not to be in the Champions League, and their aim is now probably going to be, can we keep in the top half? Against teams like that who do sit deep, I think we're seeing quite a few issues. So I think, opposite issues for both Côte d'Azur clubs, and I think that Monaco out of the two have the better chance of sustaining something resembling a title challenge.
That's interesting because, modern football is all about going for it and scoring goals and pressing high and being aggressive and tactically aggressive. But traditionally in football, we always say defences win championships. Attackers win matches, defences win championships. And I just think with Nice, if they've got that solid defensive base, it's hard to deny they have the quality up front. Terem Moffi has goals in him. Gaëtan Laborde is a good, clever forward as well. They've got a bit about them that perhaps it'll be easier to flick that switch than otherwise. Other important point that we've raised there in our very first point, and I'm already heading off track. But JJ, who we've had some classic examples of former players scoring against their club and the hands up thing. I think Emmanuel Adebayor probably holds the ultimate prize for doing the opposite of that. But Kylian Mbappé loves scoring against Monaco. And he's come through the ranks there, but every time he scores.
If I recall, because I went to Stade Louis II for his first game with PSG after playing for Monaco, it stems from a bad reception after he decided to leave Monaco, because he'd played for Monaco, if I recall, against PSG in the Trophée des Champions in Morocco, which I was also at when Dani Alves scored that stunning free kick. And then by the time the first league game rolled around in the Principality, he was on the other side. And I think that's sort of where the poor reception and the motivation to celebrate against Monaco originated from.
Luke?
I think that, you're talking about Adebayor. What about Mohamed Bayo a couple of weeks ago when he scored against his formative club, Clermont Foot? It was an incredible celebration, now obviously on loan at Le Havre from Lille. And it wasn't just I'm going to celebrate. It was running towards the fans, both arms out, sliding, chest out. He went the full 9 yards. It was a proper celebration.
Was it his first goal since leaving Clermont, though?
Almost. Obviously, yeah. There's a context with the very, very difficult spell that JJ's referring to there at Lille that really did not go his way. So I think there's a little bit of relief there at the very least. But yeah, that was an interesting way to celebrate.
I have to pick you up, JJ, on another point. Well, not pick you up. Add on, embellish that Trophée des Champions, which was at the Grand Stade of Tanger. That win, I was with Paris Saint-Germain at the time. We travelled there. We had the game. I think it was off the back of another trip. Had we just come from China? I think we'd just done pre-season in China, and this was like 3 weeks, and this was the last game. And everyone at the end of a pre-season tour, a week before the start of the season, you just want to go home. And so the game was played, and Monaco are about in this big corridor tunnel underneath the stadium. The Monaco team bus is there, and about 50 minutes, and the game had been a little bit spiteful. There'd been a little bit of back and forth for the Trophée des Champions, and the Paris Saint-Germain bus was here, and then everyone gets on the bus, and everyone's about to leave, and we're all about to go, and then we hear that the Paris Saint-Germain plane is not ready. There's a problem, and then Monaco hear the same thing. And these were two separate planes, and we sat underneath the stadium, just mingling with Monaco, Paris Saint-Germain, the players moving around, going for a walk around until 6 o'clock in the morning underneath the stadium. We're nowhere to go at the end of 3 weeks of being in China and traveling around and all this sort of stuff. And all you wanted to do was go home. And it was just a killer. And then we got home at like 9 o'clock in the morning the next day. Yes, we won the Trophée des Champions, but it was a very tough evening. Speaking of Paris Saint-Germain, JJ, I'll come to you quickly on this one, on another couple of games from round 8. If you can cast your mind back, we'll stick on Paris Saint-Germain because this was a good result. This was a a 3-1 victory over Rennes in Rennes. Rennes hitherto, like Nice, undefeated before this round of matches as well. We will have a little chat about a reaction from Luis Enrique towards a journalist post-match as well, which lives up to his reputation that he brought from Barcelona, where apparently he had more than regular run-ins with journalists in Spain as well. But Kylian Mbappé didn't score, JJ. We've since seen with Les Bleus that that's not a problem, because he once again showed that he is without a doubt the best striker in world football. But what did you make of this match against Rennes? And I'll also get you to tack on the end perhaps a little bit about Marseille and a first win for Gennaro Gattuso.
It was a really curious sort of final few days for PSG heading into that international break, because obviously they came off the back of that chastening defeat away at Newcastle in the Champions League. Yet they then produced, one of their better results of the season against a club that has really become one of their bogey teams over the last couple of years. To not only go to Rennes and beat them, but to take away their unbeaten record. It didn't look particularly favourable on paper heading into the game. But PSG produced a good performance. Vitinha scored a stunning goal. Hakimi's strong form continues, along with that of Warren Zaire-Emery as well. And yeah, it was just a funny couple of days, really, sort of heading into that international break. Again, it's kind of in line with what PSG's season has been so far, where it feels like there are, progressive steps being made, but also at the same time there are sort of signs for concern. Obviously, getting blown out in the way that they did against Newcastle in the Champions League, not ideal. And then to have Kylian Mbappé, who, by the way, by the time PSG kick off against Strasbourg in Ligue 1 after the international break, he'll have gone over a month without a goal for PSG at club level, which is, quite something, especially when you consider the miss that he had sort of 5 minutes from the end of that game, which was very unlike him. But it's I think it's another step in the right direction for PSG in terms of the chemistry, and it was important for them to show a reaction after that Newcastle defeat. But yeah, equally very very bizarre sort of couple of days where you go from such an unexpectedly heavy defeat to a very convincing win over an opponent that's been very difficult to beat over the years.
I'd completely blacked out that Newcastle result from my mind. When you started talking about it, I thought, oh my God, that actually happened. And it's even more surreal when you're watching it from Australia, because you're up at 4:45 in the morning without any sleep, watching it and just thinking, why did I get up for this? And why are we only playing 2 in midfield away in the Champions League? And why don't you change it? But anyway, full credit to Newcastle. Revenge is a dish best served cold. It will come in Paris in a few weeks' time. Marseille and Gennaro Gattuso, JJ. Important for them to get back after what had been a really difficult run. Marcelino came out in the press and had plenty to say as well in the last week about how he'd never seen anything like it. Gennaro Gattuso surely is the only man that is even capable of grabbing the Marseille supporters and the team and the club and saying, let's go, Malakias, we're going in this direction now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned last time when we were talking about Marseille that it's a club we know very well that it's emotionally charged, and the managers that can make that emotional connection with the fan base generally tend to do better. Marcelo Bielsa, a good example of that, and Gattuso, despite not being at the same level as Bielsa sort of tactically and in terms of his ideology, there's no doubt that he does have that ability to, make that emotional connection. And I think that's going to be very important. Unfortunately, I was trying to avoid talking about Marseille's convincing win over Le Havre, given my section that's coming up later on Le Havre and Luka Elsner. But no, it's important for them to get that victory and to sort of start what could potentially develop into a very good series of results, because as we all know, results are the strongest currency in football, especially in a place like Marseille. And if Gattuso can get the fans on side, one, by showing, his emotion, his passion, and two, by getting the team, to start picking up points and winning games and moving in the right direction, that's an important step. And it's been a strange old time for Marseille as well, because there's been more departures since Marcelino left, more speculation about sort of upheaval behind the scenes at the club. Javier Mario De Balta, the sporting director, has moved on now, and a lot of people are sort of changing positions and being recast behind the scenes. So, quite clearly what Marcelino was alluding to, is sort of being addressed in some way by the club's hierarchy.
Luke, Lyon, Lille. We're going to get you into the L's now, Luke. Lyon, Nuama with his first goal, the Ghanaian prodigy for Lyon, a couple for Alexandre Lacazette, but an Italian coach that hasn't so far been able to make that emotional connection with the fans, because that wasn't enough. There was a youngster by the name of Eli Junior Krupi who got a couple for himself, and Lorient, who'd been a little bit down in the dumps, came away with a 3-3 draw. Lyon are still second from bottom. Lyon still don't have a win.
Yeah, I mean, Lyon's still without a win. Just finishing up on the Marseille point, I mean, you're talking about Gattuso kind of making that connection. There's clearly a connection, I think, already between those players. But, I mean, I was at the Velodrome for the match against Brighton, and I think it's just, the atmosphere around the club isn't maybe at its best. But, he wasn't that warmly received when his name was put over the loudspeaker, but I think he'll get there, and I think results like that against Le Havre and being as he is on the sideline, I think will go a long way. That's not really the persona necessarily of Fabio Grosso, who has less experience than Gattuso, but has maybe shown more in terms of tactics and ideology during his time in Italy. So I think there is a bit of hope that change is on the way, but the noises aren't very positive. I mean, for the first time, Grosso talked about the side being in a relegation battle after that draw against Lorient, and they are. I mean, when you look at Lorient, the form that they've been on, and the way that we're speaking about them as being one of these clubs very much in this relegation battle, it's hard not to put Lyon in there as well, despite the incredible talent. I mean, Nuama is a player that a lot has been spoken about him, hasn't necessarily shown it straight away, but he will take time to adapt, and he does look like he's got incredible technical ability. So I think that he is a player who can become a key player for them going forward. And obviously there are players like Lacazette, Tolisso. There's experience in there, there's great youth in there, but you think that that's a great, mix, but it's just not necessarily happening at the minute. A little bit worried for them. And then for Lorient, a team that had gone so long without a victory, and Krupi is a player who looks like a real find already. I saw Bakayoko comparing him to Mbappé post-match, which is obviously very high praise indeed, and a long, long way to go. But I think his long-range strike, the composure to beat the man, to take the time to get it onto his stronger foot, into his arc, and then just put that in the top corner, I thought that's extremely impressive for a player of his age. So he is probably currently the player in terms of prospects to keep an eye on in this Ligue 1 season.
Well, if we look at recent Marseille coaches that have created that link, there's and not so recent, but Roland Courbis, Didier Deschamps, Jorge Sampaoli, Eric Gerets was another that had this this fire about him. Marcelo Bielsa, of course. Compare that to Olympique Lyonnais, and there are a couple of crossovers. Alain Perrin and Rudy Garcia, who had both, but Remy Gard, Paul Le Guen, now Fabio Grosso, Jacques Santini. It's not quite the same passion and fire in the belly, is it, that gets Lyon across the line, or that gets Olympique Marseille and their fans happy. Mind you, it doesn't mean that either sets of fans are happy at the moment. There was a 1-1 draw in the Derby du Nord between Lens and Lille. And of course, not great scenes. Well, great scenes on the football pitch for 90 minutes just about, with Montpellier against Clermont. Some fantastic goals, some brilliant football. Montpellier looking like they were getting back to winning ways with what was going to be a 4-2 win. And then a brain fade by one of the Montpellier travelling supporters threw a firecracker onto the pitch that exploded near the Clermont goalkeeper, Maury Dior, who was taken from the field. The referee ultimately abandoning the match, saying that Maury Dior, the Clermont goalkeeper, couldn't continue. The firecracker that was thrown came from the away fans. It's not dissimilar in many respects to Metz Lyon from a few years ago, where Anthony Lopez was temporarily deafened by a firecracker that was thrown on that match. I think it was replayed in the end, wasn't it? because Metz were leading by a goal to nil when their fans did that as well. It's a really similar situation here with Montpellier fans. Laurent Nicolin, the Montpellier president, was absolutely furious and called his, once we find this brain-dead supporter, we're going to get him thrown out for life. I mean, 3 points for Montpellier are a little bit more important than at another club, perhaps. And what I really like about Laurent Nicolin, and Lulu Nicolin, his dad, was the same. We're going to hear about that great Montpellier side that won the league in 2012 coming up soon. But they never took any crap, whether it was from opposition players or coaches, but from their own fans either. And Laurent Nicolin seems to have the same DNA, obviously, as his dad. And it's good to see that they're sticking by their guns. That decision, it has been announced by the disciplinary commission for the LFP, is going to be ruled on the incident on the 25th of October. So not before the next round of matches, but in between the two, we will know what is held in store for Montpellier against Clermont in what will almost certainly be, if the match is not replayed, almost certainly to be 3 points for Clermont, I would think, on precedence. But you never know what could happen with Montpellier, who were leading 4-2 with the game nearly finished. Any comments on that one, guys, before I wrap up on round 8? All good. Forever hold your peace. Nantes got up over Strasbourg by 2-1, a big away win for them. We've spoken about Nice 1-0 up over Metz and Monaco, both with away wins on the Saturday. Brest were held 1-1 by Toulouse. Lyon's 3-3. Lens 1-1. Paris Saint-Germain. We've been through the entire round of action, which means on the league table, it's Monaco, who are a point clear of Nice, who are a point clear of Paris Saint-Germain and Brest. The Pirates still there, and they play each other in a couple of weeks' time as well. Reims are in 5th place, a further 2 points behind. Then come Marseille, Lille, Rennes, Nantes, Toulouse, Strasbourg into the bottom half of the table. Montpellier with a possible 3 points in the offing. Against bottom club Clermont. Le Havre are there in 13th place. Lens are on the climb. That's 2 wins and a draw in their last 3. 3 games undefeated after that disastrous start to the season with just 1 point after 5 games. Olympique Lyonnais looking enviously at how Lens have managed to turn that around. And they beat Arsenal in the Champions League as well, to boot. Metz and Lorient are sitting just above the relegation zone. And then it is the only 2 sides without a win still this season, Olympique Lyonnais and Clermont Foot. Very quickly, gentlemen, for the first time, because we are in the international break, Les Bleus are through to Euro 2024. JJ, what have you made of their performances and their 2 victories and, victory and then one to a friendly match against Scotland to come? But what have you made of this international window, and tell us a little bit more, in particular, about your love for that second goal by Kylian Mbappé.
Yeah, phenomenal strike, and what a way to announce that you're definitely not out of form, because the question was starting to be raised after a fairly dry spell with PSG and sort of speculation over whether he was fully fit or not. I think overall it's been a very impressive qualification campaign for Les Bleus. You can't argue against it. What a reaction to the heartbreak of losing on penalties in the World Cup final. At the end of 2022, they only conceded their first goal in the entire qualification period in that game against the Dutch, sort of 5 minutes from the end. Didier Deschamps really has gotten a strong reaction from the players, from the group, and it's difficult to argue at this moment in time that they're not sort of early favourites heading into next summer in Germany. When you look at the likes of Portugal, who have also been very impressive in terms of their performance in qualification. Slightly different given that they play more games because their group is bigger by 1 team, but equally at the same time, apart from that friendly defeat to Germany, it's been very impressive so far in 2023 for France. And obviously they'll hope to sign off by avoiding any further defeats between now and the end of the year. But, things look very good at this moment in time for France on the international stage.
All right, time to keep moving. Now we are going to go to our first feature of this episode of Le Beau Jeu. That was Jonathan Johnson speaking. We've got Luke Entwistle here as well. I'm your host, Robbie Thomson. Luke, we know you're down on the south coast. We know you keep a very close watch on all the clubs in the south of France, but in particular, AS Monaco. We've seen how good their youth academy is in recent seasons. Obviously, Kylian Mbappé is the figurehead for that. But every season, there seems to be a new young player who bursts out of the ranks. We thought we were going to be talking about Elias Ben Seguir at the start of this season after his impressive end to last season. With a little injury that's kept him sidelined, we haven't seen so much of him as of yet, but it wasn't long before someone else caught the eye. So let's find out a little bit more about Maghnes Akliouche.
When you think of forwards who have come through AS Monaco's prestigious La Diagonale Academy in recent years, you likely think of Elias Ben Seguir, and for good reason as well, given the way that he burst onto the scene in the second half of last season. However, that is now beginning to change, and the reason for that is Maghnes Akliouche, a player who has been on the lips of fans and of people around the club for many years. But given his failure, I suppose, to break into this first team, to consolidate a place in this first team, there were doubts as to whether he would ever make it as a first-team player. I think those doubts are now beginning to dissipate slightly. At the start of last season, it was a much less rosy picture. Sofiane Diop had just left, and Philippe Clermont had said that in the limited minutes he had seen from Akliouche and from what he'd seen in training, he very much warranted more minutes that season. That was what was expected. However, that is not what we got. And once again, he was basically a backseat passenger for most of the season, despite having a few starts and coming off the bench on a semi-regular basis. He didn't have the impact that maybe the club wanted, certainly not the impact that he would have wanted either. But that is now beginning to change, and absences have played their part, but also Akliouche seemingly has the trust of new manager Adi Hutter, and that cannot be underestimated. He was brought on in the first game of the season against Clermont with Monaco leading 3-2. And he got the proverbial monkey off his back by scoring his first goal in Ligue 1 Uber Eats, Monaco's fourth, and putting the game to bed. He has since gone from strength to strength and has started to clearly work on some of the weaknesses within his game. Akliouche is a player who is technically extremely gifted, has an incredible first touch in particular, and is great in tight spaces. But there are weaknesses in his game, and one of those is notably his finishing, which it was not a problem against Olympique de Marseille, I think it's fair to say, getting 2 goals, both of them brilliant finishes, and also getting an assist for Folarin Balogun as well. So he's showing great growth under Adi Hutter, and he is now really putting himself in the conversation because great competition still exists within this side. There's notably 4 players for great first-team options for just 2 first-team spots, and Hutter's system has helped Akliouche, I think, break in, because, he likes to play as a number 10. He's not a wide player, as he was often deployed under Clermont. But Hutter, with his 2 number 10s, there are 2 positions up for grabs. And okay, Golovin, Minamino, I think that they're the 2 front runners, and you've got Ben Seguir now returning. But Akliouche is now an academy product who is really putting his name in the mix. He is not getting ahead of himself. He is currently on France under-21 duty and has just been speaking about how it's so important for him to be decisive every time he gets on the pitch, to really make his mark when he gets his chance and to make the most of the minutes that he has, because even despite his clear growth in his game, the weaknesses that have been worked on over these months and years, there is still great competition there. But I think at least at this point, we can say that he has very much put his name in the hat to be one of those 2 starting number 10s under Adi Hutter. And when you think about great forwards that Monaco are producing, great prospects who are also getting many minutes for the first team, you think of Ben Seguir, but I think now you also think of Maghnes Akliouche.
JJ, a little reaction to that. You've been in France for nearly 20 years now, watching this incredible production line of youth talent that comes through every season. I mean, it's called the League of Talents. Every other league in Europe benefits at some level from this incredible production line of French talent. We know that it's second only to Sao Paulo in terms of production talent that's Paris, for a basin of production talent. France has more players, along with Brazil, playing Champions League football than any other country by some distance. And this is just the latest example of it. If you look at Thierry Henry with the France under-21 squad, I mean, it's full of... There are 17-year-olds in that squad that are all playing Ligue 1 football. For Warren Zaire-Emery, he's playing Champions League football.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a very exciting time. There's rarely a dull moment in terms of sort of talent development in the French game, but it is a particularly exciting batch of players. Listening to Luke talking about Akliouche, but look at some of those other talents as well. You mentioned Zaire-Emery. You've got Ryan Cherki. It's not going his way at Lyon at the moment, but still a very exciting talent. And some of the other sort of younger gems in there. I know Kelly Mwenda came off the bench. You've got Mathys Tel, and there's already some speculation that Germany might try and naturalise him if he doesn't get called up to France at senior level, which I think is a bit optimistic given sort of the way that his development has gone so far.
You think they're going off a little too soon? Is that just a little too early, maybe?
Oh, absolutely, I agree. And you think as well about sort of the fact that we're probably not going to have Olivier Giroud around much longer. There are going to be berths opening up in sort of the attacking positions for France as well ahead of the 2026 World Cup. So I think it's only a matter of time before we see some of these talents jump to the senior side. But, you're right to be talking about, these teenagers playing with such, maturity and consistency already, not just, in the occasional meetup with the under-21s, but also regularly in Ligue 1 as well. It's, it's really exciting times. And I think it adds an element of intrigue as well to have somebody as iconic as Thierry Henry leading the team potentially ahead of the Olympics in Paris next summer as well.
And yet, les espoirs very rarely ever win anything, do they? I mean, that's the great les espoirs, which translates as our hopes, or the hopes, the hopeful, our future hopes, les espoirs. It's the France under-21 side, and as Sylvain Ripoll will attest, and many before him, Raymond Domenech, and coaches that have often struggled to try and get the best out of France's under-21 squad, or any France youth team, actually. It's a curious conundrum, but there's no denying the talent is there. Well, time to get a history lesson from Professor Andreas Evagora. It's something of a sequel this weekend on Le Beau Jeu. He's taking us back to 2012, the year after Eden Hazard's Lille won the Ligue 1 Uber Eats title. This time, it was an unknown quantity named Olivier Giroud who fired Montpellier to the title ahead of Carlo Ancelotti's PSG.
July 2007, Grenoble Football Club. Coach Mecha Bazdarevic is looking to prune his squad ahead of the new second division season. The Bosnian takes a final look at the club's playing staff and calls youngster Olivier Giroud into his office. The gangly 20-year-old has dreamed of playing in Ligue 1 since his childhood, but the striker's only scored 2 goals in 2 years at Grenoble, and he's about to get some terrible news. Olivier, you aren't good enough to play in the second division, let alone the first, says Bazdarevic. Sorry, but we're letting you go. 5 years later, Giroud was rebuilding his career and spearheading outsiders Montpellier to a shock Ligue 1 title. As the club pulled off one of the biggest surprises in the history of French football, Giroud was more than top scorer. He symbolised the us-against-them mentality of a team made up of cast-offs and youth products. A season earlier, champions Lille were inspired by the generational talent that was Eden Hazard. Giroud couldn't have been more different. After being rejected at Grenoble, he played amateur football while studying to become a physical education teacher. But those humble beginnings didn't stop Giroud launching a stellar career on the back of a quite unbelievable season. Tucked in the southwest of the country, unheralded Montpellier Hérault Sport Club were also rans in French football and never had come close to winning the league until 2012. Known as La Paillade, the neighbourhood where the Mosson Stadium is located, they'd finished 14th in 2011, that only their second campaign in the top flight after a long period in Ligue 2. The club was perhaps best known for its larger-than-life president, Louis Nicolin, known as Loulou, who'd made his fortune in the rubbish collection business. There's little confidence in the air And before the 11-12 season, Loulou tells coach René Girard that nothing less than 42 points and survival would be acceptable. Not that there's significant funds. Henri Bedimo arrived for €2 million, but Girard was told to rely on youth team products like keeper Geoffrey Jourdain, Mapu Yanga Mbiwa, and the mercurial Younes Belhanda. And there were free signings like Vittorio Hilton, shown the door by Marseille. As for goals, a couple of seasons earlier, Loulou had been impressed by a promising striker at Minot's Tours during a match against Montpellier in the second division. That striker was Giroud, who'd worked hard on his game since that Grenoble rejection. Turning down offers from Celtic and Middlesbrough, Giroud signed for Montpellier to fulfil his dream of playing in Ligue 1. August 2011 and title talks centred on the champions Lille, Lyon, Marseille and especially PSG, who'd just been bought by Qatar Sports Investments. Montpellier were in a different financial league. They had the sixth smallest budget in the division, but that didn't stop them embarking upon a thrilling battle with PSG. Indeed, from October on, only Montpellier and PSG occupied the top two spots. There were highs and lows during a crazy season. After a December loss at unfancied Evian, Girard wished his team an unhappy Christmas holiday, adding that he never wanted to see them again. After that Evian disaster, Nicolas even feared that his team wouldn't win another game that season. But Girard had built a solid, united group inspired by the so-called Payade spirit, a team that bonded as the season wore on. 2012 started with 4 straight wins. A 2-2 draw at Carlo Ancelotti's PSG in February earned a vital point. Montpellier went top with 9 games to spare. Saturday, the 13th of May 2012, 2 matches left and Montpellier are 3 points clear. A legendary clash against third place Lille at the Mosson. Hazard is sensational, but it's goalless in injury time. Then Montpellier hacked the ball out of defence. Giroud controls brilliantly on his chest, charges towards goal and finds Karim Aitfana, who strikes into an empty net. Montpellier snatched the win with the last kick of the game. The Mosson erupts. Keeper Jourdain is in tears.
C'est exceptionnel, c'est fantastique, c'est magnifique et c'est miraculeux. Oh, ce que c'est bon. Karim Aitfana marque le but de la victoire contre Lille.
But PSG have also won, so it's down to the last day of the season. The 20th of May 2012, the biggest day in Montpellier's history, Girard's team travelled to Auxerre with a 3-point lead over PSG. The two leaders' goal difference is identical. Footage of the players on the team bus before the game shows a group that's clearly tense. The excitement of the Lille win has given way to a nervy expectation. With Montpellier needing a point, one of the most memorable nights in Ligue 1 history would follow. Before the game, the heavens open. Bedimo walks over to the Montpellier fans behind the goal. We're going to need you tonight, he said. We really need you.
On aura besoin de vous ce soir. On aura grave besoin de vous.
20 minutes in, disaster for Montpellier. Olivier Capo gives the hosts the lead. But with 12 minutes later, Nigerian forward John Utaka has made it 1-1. Meanwhile, PSG have gone behind at Lorient. While the focus is on Montpellier's celebrating fans, suddenly there's a disturbance at the other end. Auxerre's supporters are furious. Their team is getting relegated and they throw objects onto the pitch. The match is delayed. PSG scored 2 quick-fire goals. It's still 1-1 in Auxerre and Montpellier are in the dressing room, knowing defeat would mean the end of their title dream. But a brilliant late goal from Utaka seals a 2-1 win. Montpellier champions for the first and only time in their history. With 21 league goals, Giroud was launching his top-level career, one that would see him become a World Cup winner and France's all-time top goal scorer. All a far cry from that rejection at lowly Grenoble. On the pitch after that final victory, he tells reporters, "This is incredible. It's why you play football, to win titles, to experience moments like this. For Montpellier, it's just amazing."
C'est indescriptible, tu joues au foot pour être champion de France, pour vivre des moments comme ça, pour gagner des coupes, gagner des titres. Et c'est exceptionnel pour Montpellier.
Well, what a season that was. I even remember as a PSG fan at that stage, finding it really hard to be disappointed just because Montpellier was such an incredible story. I think it's probably for English football fans a Leicester type moment. This was a club that were in the second division, 3 years before that. They had a remarkable rise, and you talk about fairy tales and Lulu Nicolin, who'd spent his fortune in building this club up. They were just a cool club with a good identity, and they finally won something for the first time ever. This is the club that had Eric Cantona and Carlos Valderrama when they won the French Cup in 1990. I mean, that's a cool club if you've got that in your history books. But never even looked like winning the league, never ever. And they did it with not only someone like John Utaka, a journeyman, hugely talented but scoring goals. Olivier Giroud, who, as we heard, had been around, who'd been top scorer with Tours the year before in the second division. Hilton, the veteran Brazilian. But then they did it with a bunch of kids that came through the ranks there. Yunus Belhanda, Aït Fana, these guys that were just midfielders, Yangambiwa, these guys that were Geoffroy Jourdren, who'd been to Clairefontaine but had come up and had been at the club for years. I mean, it was incredible, and it was this feeling that Paris Saint-Germain weren't ready yet. Paris Saint-Germain still had all the trappings of a Paris Saint-Germain. JJ, you can confirm this, that only had 2 league titles in their entire history before. Well, up until that point, they'd still only had 2 league titles, one in 86, one in 94, and they were a cup side. Paris Saint-Germain were a cup side that just for some reason could never win a league title. Everything had to be perfect for them to win a league title. And here it looked like it was going to continue forever, no matter the Qatari investment.
Yeah, and I think as well, it's quite easy to sort of forget what happened during that season as well, because PSG started the season under Uncle Antoine Kombouaré, but finished it under Carlo Ancelotti's watch. There was a number of transfers made sort of in the mid-season with the likes of Thiago Motta arriving, Maxwell as well, but plenty of talent in that PSG side. And I think, many people really expected that PSG would just sort of bulldoze their way to the title immediately, and obviously that was proven not to be so. I have very fond memories of a fantastic 2-2 draw between PSG and Montpellier, where Alex, the Brazilian, famed for his cannon and his ability to shoot from range, scored the opening goal. And I think he had Belhanda and Utaka both scoring for Montpellier, and Guillaume Waro equalising later on for PSG. But it wasn't enough, because it was essentially sort of a battle at that point between the top 2 sides in the league. And sort of going back to your point, I mean, there were just so many phenomenal names that were coming through for Montpellier at that time. You had Remy Cabella, you had Benjamin Stambouli as well. It was it was a really solid team. They had guys come through a bit later like Morgan Sanson, but I don't think from memory he was there at the time that they won that Ligue 1 title. But it was just, it felt like it was meant to be from, sort of a few months before the end of that season. PSG were having some teething issues, and we all know that the failure for PSG to win that Ligue 1 title led to the likes of Thiago Silva, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Marco Verratti, Ezekiel Lavezzi all coming in later on that year in the summer ahead of the following season, when PSG finally did get it over the line. But no, it was a fantastic tussle, and like you said earlier on in the show, to see Lulu Nicolin celebrating. We've celebrated him for years for his phenomenal quotes and sort of his analogies of things. But to see him sort of with his punk hairstyle, I think he had his hair sprayed like orange and blue to celebrate the title. Those scenes were phenomenal. As much as sort of the disappointment was massive in Paris that they didn't get the immediate Ligue 1 title, there was a real heartwarming aspect to that Montpellier title triumph.
You're listening to Jonathan Johnson, Luke Entwistle, and myself, Robbie Thomson, on Le Beau Jeu, the official Ligue 1 podcast. Find us on all your podcast platforms. Like, subscribe, follow, recommend. We're on Twitter at Ligue1_ENG, and of course on the web at Ligue1.com. Now it's time for what is effectively a filter to find the biggest English-speaking French football boffin in the world. That's right. It's the world's most amazing Ligue 1 Uber Eats quiz in English. It's called Déjà Who, and here's how it works. I spend all day leading up to recording the podcast coming up with cryptic clues to try and make it as difficult for you as possible. And when you put all those clues into ChatGPT, which, by the way, in French, sounds like you're saying, "Cat, I farted." If you were to say it with a French accent, chat GPT is basically cat, I farted. At any rate, ChatGPT will almost certainly not be able to help you, nor will the cat, to try and find the answers to Déjà Who. If you can get it right, you go into the running for a Ligue 1 jersey. And this month, the jersey we are giving away is Terem Moffi's OGC Nice jersey. So get your thinking caps on and listen very carefully to this. Who am I? As a teenager, I played for several teams in my homeland before impressing on trial and signing for a Ligue 1 club at just 19 years of age, with whom I went on to win a league and cup double. Over the course of my career, I lifted the UEFA Cup and won Olympic gold. I played in Italy, England, Germany, Serbia, and Iran before hanging up my boots. I played with Laurent Blanc, Ronaldo, Fenomeno, Nwankwo Kanu, Leonardo, Miroslav Klose, and Gabriel Batistuta, amongst others. Who am I? And what fashion statement did I become famous for on the football pitch? So there you go. See how your farting cat can deal with that. Ladies and gentlemen, get your answers in via email to ligue1podcast@gmail.com, ligue1podcast@gmail.com. If you can get the answer right, you will go into the running along with the last episode's quiz into the running to try and win that Terem Moffi OGC Nice jersey. Okay, now it's time for our final feature of this episode. You will have seen that Le Havre are back in the top flight. It's the first time in 15 years for this famous football club in France. Famous, amongst other things, for a fabulous youth academy. But now they're trying to make a name for themselves back in the top flight. And to tell us all about it is Jonathan Johnson.
Havre Athletic Club are currently defying pre-season predictions of relegation back to Ligue 2 by sitting 13th in Ligue 1 with 9 points from 8 games played. Back in the French top flight for the first time since 2008, the Sky and Navy Blues are enjoying life under Slovenian head coach Luka Elsner with 2 wins and 3 draws so far. Born in Ljubljana but raised during much of his childhood in France and Nice's Fabron-Corta, on a hill and 5 minutes from one of the country's most beautiful beachfronts, Elsner hails from a footballing family. Father Marco played for Nice over 2 spells in the late 1980s and early 1990s, while grandfather Branko and younger brother Rock also made their careers in the game. Luka came through the ranks with Nice and then Cannes in the early 2000s, but never quite broke through, although the family laid down strong roots in the area. Former France national team captain and Nice Youth Academy product Hugo Lloris remains a close friend of both Elsner brothers, as he told L'Equipe back in 2019. I grew up with Rock. We saw each other every day with his parents and my grandparents picking us up from training sessions, said Lloris. We got to know each other's families and would regularly be at one home or another, and that's how I got to know Luka, who's 4 years older than I am. Their father, Marco, was a club legend and they stayed in Nice, so we never lost touch. Luka returned to his native Slovenia, where he enjoyed a respectable playing career with 2 notable spells with Domžal, where he won 2 top-flight league titles, a Slovenian Cup, and played for his country of birth. There were also spells in Austria and Bahrain before Elsner finished his playing days with Domžal and started his coaching adventure first as an assistant in 2012, before finally getting the top job in 2013. It was a move that he'd been laying the groundwork for during the latter years as a player.
It comes from two aspects. First is that I never thought that I'd be a professional football player. So until I was 22, 23 and my move back to Slovenia, I never thought about being a professional football player because I didn't have much talent, especially not in France. So that's why I studied and prepared myself to be in football, but in another role than the player one. So I studied hard and tried to prepare myself to be a member of the staff, maybe a conditioning coach, something like that. But definitely my plan was to coach at the end. I coached youth teams at that moment in France, and then I had the luck to get the opportunity. I did overall quite well for my capacities, and I think that I reached my maximum playing for playing in Slovenia, a bit abroad, and touching the national team level. It gave me a lot of experience, but the passion for coaching was there very early on, and I think that I got that from my grandfather, who was a great coach, a great systematic coach with a great head for processes and systematical work. And I had also my father, who was more on the romantic side of football, so tried to mix both, and that makes my identity as a football coach. But I stopped at 31 playing football because I wanted to get early in, make mistakes early, and get that experience as soon as possible.
Elsner's 3 years as Domžale head coach remains his longest tenure to date, with one final year with Olympia Ljubljana before leaving Slovenia in 2017 for Paphos in Cyprus. After 1 year there, he was snapped up by Union SG, and an impressive Belgian Cup run caught the eye of Amiens in Ligue 1, and in 2019 he returned to France. Unfortunately for Elsner, the 2019-20 season was ended prematurely because of COVID-19, which saw Amiens forcibly relegated to the second tier before his departure a few games into the following campaign. However, all was not lost in Amiens, as it was there that he and a veteran Mathieu Bodmer would cross paths for the first time, and it was already clear that the ex-PSG, Lyon, Lille and Nice man had a future in the game beyond playing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think he knew. I think that everybody who knows him was aware of that. He is so passionate about football. He watches every game, watches every player. He loves young talents. He can speak with presidents and he can speak with players and deliver the message. So it was for him very logical to stay in football and get that opportunity that he used so well and build that squad that was able on the first season of the project to deliver that amazing run and that title.
More on Elsner and Bodmer together shortly. Next up was a half season back in Belgium with Kortrijk before fallen giant Standard Liège came knocking after a difficult start to the 2021-22 term. Elsner only saw out the end of a difficult campaign with the Reds, but of significant note in his backroom staff at Stade de Sclessin was none other than now Reims head coach Will Still. The Belgian-born Englishman is now part of a new wave of talented and young head coaches taking French football by storm after a breakout season in the Champagne region.
Of course, I think they've been very interesting. They played very courageous and brave football, not caring about the opponent, being tough for any team, producing a lot of good football. They obviously have a very good squad, but I think he came, in the right moment where the squad needed a positive approach, some enthusiasm, and he's the right guy for this. He's transferring a lot of energy. He allows to take risks, and that makes football interesting. So I was not very surprised that he was successful, knowing what he is and how he coaches. But there's a new season. It's always difficult to confirm, and it will be a tough league for everybody because now, being with 18 clubs, you look at the list of the teams. You're not sure who's going to be in the relegation battle because there's so many good teams, so many big budgets. It will be probably one of the most interesting Ligue 1 season in a long time.
Le Havre in Ligue 2 moved quickly to secure Elsner as head coach, who was reunited with Bodmer, this time in his new role as sporting director, and within 12 months both led the Normandy side to promotion. Hack's second-tier success was the first title of Elsner's career, and now he is targeting survival in Ligue 1 as the famed youth development giants seek to re-establish themselves in the elite.
Well, I knew the past and the amazing development of the youth because it's a club that has a strong identity and a strong model developing young talents, and that's something that I like a lot, and trying to combine winning and developing players. So I think one of the reasons why I was enthusiastic about that project is because of that possibility to work with young players. But also I wanted to work with Mathieu Bodmer, who is a sporting director, and we've been friends since we've been together at Amiens, and we think alike in terms of football, and I was sure that our relationship would be productive.
Elsner has paid close attention to former PSG head coach Mauricio Pochettino as well as Atletico Madrid's legendary tactician Diego Simeone in forming his main coaching ideology. Le Havre are now benefiting from the first few experiences of Elsner's career, which included his Amiens stint. The 1959 Coupe de France champions will hope that the best is yet to come from this promising Elsner-Bodmer tandem, which has been years in the making.
Very interesting, JJ, and great to hear so much from Luka Elsner as well. What a strange career, and I guess that type of coach that always knew he only wanted to do one thing, even when he was playing. Nice to hear a professional footballer also say, look, I was never really that good, which I think is what every amateur football fan wants to hear from a professional footballer every now and again. Luke, what have you made of Le Havre's fist being back in the top flight?
I mean, I think it's a team that we maybe wrote off a little bit, or at least we put in the conversation about relegation, but really we ought not to have, given, their form last season. Until that run-in, they'd only lost, the very final couple of games, they'd only lost one game in the entire season. And we spoke earlier about the difference between Monaco and Nice and the fact that, well, it's always been said that defences win titles, and they had comfortably the best defence in Ligue 1 last season. Their defensive solidity is kind of being added to. I'd say I quite like Alioui as a player, not just because of his name, which is a little bit of a mouthful, but I quite enjoy it. Another actually AS Monaco Academy product, but it seems actually like quite a well-rounded team, despite the fact that there are no superstars within it by any stretch of the imagination, and despite the fact that it isn't a team that was heavily invested in during the summer. You say it's an academy team. It's a team that's always brought players through. Probably the most recent example off the top of my head is probably Isaac Touré, who's now went to Marseille but is now at Lorient. So it's a team that has brought through some great players. Obviously Paul Pogba's a historical one, but there are others as well. And I think that ultimately it's a team that has a long-term project, and they may be something of a yo-yo club, but I think that this year they definitely have enough to keep them up given what we've seen so far. And I think a lot of that does go to Luka Elsner, but also to the structure just more generally at the club, and to Mathieu Bodmer, who did an incredible interview, I remember last year, to L'Equipe, saying just how absolutely football mad he is, has a room, lives in the stadium at Le Havre, watches 50 games per week, an absolute football nut, and it shows kind of on the pitch, in their scouts and in their decision making, which is taking them this far and could take them further up the table between now and the end of the season.
Now, Luke, I'm not one for obviously pulling people up, and I know it's not your fault, the fact that you were born many decades after myself and a couple of decades after JJ, perhaps, or maybe not quite, but to call Paul Pogba an historical figure, I think, yes, maybe his career is over as we speak, because it may be difficult for him to come back. But Paul Pogba is one of the more recent, I think, even I.
Everything is relative.
graduates out of Le Havre. I think for my generation, and this is one that saw the advent of the Premier League and this sort of era of 90s and noughties football, it was Florent Cinema Pongol and Anthony Le Tallec, who were the two that left Le Havre as kids, 16 or 17-year-olds, to go to Liverpool, to Gerard Houlier's side. They were picked up, but they were two. They were the likes of, more recently, Mamadou Niang was Le Havre or Steve Mondonda came through Le Havre as well, I think. JJ, in your research, what most impressed you about delving into this Le Havre side?
Don't forget about Charles Nzogbia as well. You've got Riyad Mahrez, even Dimitri Payet. Spent
Dimitri
some time
Payet,
there.
yeah.
And there's just the list goes on and on. Ibrahim Bar, if you want to sort of throw it all the way back to sort of the late 90s. But no, it was very... I think the thing that struck me the most sort of in putting the piece together was... You only realise when you really delve into it sort of how deep those connections go for him, with his time in France, because obviously he grew up, partly because his dad was playing in France, and then the fact that the family just put down their roots there, became very close friends with Hugo Lloris as well. So it was really fascinating to sort of track that kind of trajectory and then see how sort of the early days of his playing career his managerial career played out, because it kind of felt like he was always on this journey that was going to bring him back to France at some point. It was a bit of a false dawn with Amiens, but it now feels like the right fit for him at Le Havre. And I'm really keen to see sort of what he and Bodmer can do, assuming that they, manage to stabilise Le Havre in Ligue 1 this season, which, should realistically be the only sort of aim, and then sort of how they can push it on afterwards. Because there is real potential, I think, for Le Havre to re-establish themselves in France's elite. They've got so much going for them, not just a very solid team on paper with a good coach, but they've also got the fantastic, I would say new stadium, but they've been playing in it for about 10 years now. It's just because they've been sort of down in the lower reaches of French football until very recently that we forget that. But the facilities are fantastic, and I think there is real potential there for Le Havre to push on and sort of be the strongest example of the how fertile the Normandy region can be, because we've had some great examples from there over the years. Caen as well, who currently are languishing in the second tier, bringing through the likes of Thomas Lemar, guys like that. So fantastic to have a youth development powerhouse like Le Havre back in the top flight. And fingers crossed we get some more gems sort of the same ilk as some of the previous alumni.
It's interesting you mentioned that, JJ. I actually commentated the first ever international match at the Stade Océane, and it was France-Uruguay back in 2012. And I think it was Didier Deschamps' first match in charge as well, just after Euro 2012, when he replaced Larry White in charge. So there you go. That's... So the Stade Océane is just as old as Didier Deschamps' international reign as France national team coach as well. Very interesting. Good to hear about one of our provincial clubs that are doing well, and a very old one, the oldest football club in France as well, founded by English sailors, I think, in the Normandy port town back in the late 1800s. We're almost done, so time to look ahead now to the next two rounds of matches, because we're a bi-monthly episode now of Le Beau Jeu, so we're looking ahead to rounds 9 and 10. Round 9, first of all, gentlemen, we've got some big games coming up. Le Havre are at home to Lens, so two sides sitting mid-table, or in the ventre mou, as the French would say, in the soft stomach of the Ligue 1 standings. Very, very enigmatic term for it. Le Havre versus Lens. Paris Saint-Germain entertains Strasbourg on Saturday afternoon. Nice versus Marseille. Luke, I'll get your a quick appraisal of that one. Lorient take on Rennes in a Breton derby. Lille versus Brest. Nantes Montpellier. Toulouse versus Reims. Monaco Metz, so top, looking to maintain their grip at the top of the standings against a struggling Metz side. And then Olympique Lyonnais versus Clermont Foot. Luke, that Mediterranean derby, it's not quite a Côte d'Azur derby. Marseille is a little further along the coast. It's a bit of a drive, but they're close enough for there to be a fair bit of animosity there, aren't there, between those two clubs?
Yeah, a fair bit, I think it's fair to say. And obviously recent history with a bit of crowd trouble always adds something else to the mix. I mean, a short drive, an even longer train journey somehow. I think that just tells you a lot about the trains in the region. But I think a really interesting match in store. I mean, obviously, Gattuso has already faced an Italian manager in De Zerbi when he faced Brighton. He faces another Italian manager here, and they couldn't really be at more opposite ends of the spectrum. You know, Gattuso is the mentality monster, kind of, you know, really G's up his players kind of manager, whereas of course Farioli is more this methodical professor. I think that's kind of the contrast that's being drawn between those two managers, and I think it will create an interesting match. I think that Nice will naturally go into that as slight favourites, but I really think it's very evenly poised, that match there.
JJ, Paris Saint-Germain at home to Strasbourg. Obviously a big game, important for Paris Saint-Germain after the international break to stay on winning ways. Strasbourg are a side that are showing signs and then just struggling a little bit under Patrick Vieira. But I'm not going to ask you about this game. I want to move down to Lyon versus Clermont. Because who would have thought at the start of the season that this would be the le match de la peur, if you like, the game of fear, already 9 games into the season between the only two sides without a win, and it almost is a little derby, isn't it? They're two sides in the certainly on the same latitude of France anyway. Enough to get some good travelling support from Clermont over to Groupama Stadium, but crazy to think that this is 17 versus 18.
Yeah, absolutely. Something of a disaster derby. And if the pressure wasn't sort of building to the levels that they're reaching at the moment around Groupama Stadium, you know, you'd sort of fancy Lyon to finally pick up their first win of the season. But I think the irony in all of this is that you know, even if Lyon weren't to be beaten, they could be overtaken in the table by Clermont if the disciplinary committee does decide to award them the 3 points for that, you know, the mess at Montpellier. So, you know, a lot is riding on this for Fabio Grosso and Lyon. You know, again, the last couple of weeks have been sort of dominated by a bit of upheaval at the club. You know, there's murmurings about sort of a bit of, you know, discontent at the very top of the hierarchy. You know, you've got certain members of the backroom staff leaving as Fabio Grosso stamps his authority on sort of on the playing and coaching staff. So it's going to be very interesting to see, you know, sort of how this one plays out. It did look as if Lyon, you know, might finally get their first points of the season against Lorient, but then a couple of, you know, absolutely phenomenal goals denied them that, as we already touched on. So, you know, this one has to be this is a must-win game for Grosso and Lyon, because the longer that they go without picking up their first 3 points of the season, the greater you know, this pressure will be. And if they can finally get, you know, a victory on the board, perhaps they can start moving up the table, you know, like a Lens, for example. But, you know, this is the tricky kind of game where Clermont will, I mean, they'll look at the situation knowing that they may well end up with 3 points from the Montpellier game and feel like they have nothing to lose. And that's very dangerous for Lyon against a team that did extremely well against all odds last season.
You've heard of demolition derbies before, but this is the disaster derby. Olympique Lyonnais versus Clermont Foot coming up this weekend on Ligue 1. Thank you, JJ, for that. And then the next week, week 10 of the season, more huge matches coming up. JJ, I'll give you your chance now to tell us a little bit about Paris Saint-Germain, even though you'll have to get out the crystal ball a little bit. But PSG on the road to Brest. Now that as well, we're talking of surprises. I, for one, am just astonished every time I look at the ladder and see Brest in the top 5. I just doesn't equate. It doesn't add up in my brain, but they're there. They're doing something right. And Paris Saint-Germain, you know, we'll have to wait and see if they've turned the corner under Luis Enrique. But what do you make of this one coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. Really appetizing. And I don't think many of us would have expected to say that about Brest PSG at the beginning of the season or even just a couple of weeks ago. But it's been a very unexpectedly convincing start to the season for Brest. And, you know, while PSG still look a bit patchy from time to time, certainly when they're up against sort of, I guess, what you could respectfully term sort of like the non like elite band of clubs that they come up against in Ligue 1, you know, they run the risk of dropping points. We saw, you know, Clermont, a hapless Clermont, you know, claim a point against them a couple of weeks ago with Maury Dior, coming back to haunt his old club. So, I think Brest will fancy their chances there. A lot will obviously depend on what happens for PSG against Strasbourg, whether Mbappé can get himself back amongst the goals, but also they've got that important Champions League clash with Milan, the first part of a double header coming up. So it's shaping up to be a crucial couple of weeks for PSG.
Also in round 10 of the season, Clermont versus Nice, Reims against Lorient, Lens v Nantes in one for the nostalgics. Lille take on AS Monaco. That's coming your way in a moment, Luke. Metz versus Le Havre, Montpellier Toulouse, Rennes v Strasbourg. So a bit of the Julien Stefanico before the big Olympico, where Olympique de Marseille take on Olympique Lyonnais. That will be another test for the two coaches. I have the feeling we've spoken enough about Marseille and Lyon, so we'll review that one in a couple of weeks' time when it comes up. But Luke, Lille versus Monaco. Now, this is a Lille side that are flattering to deceive a little bit at the moment this season. I think a lot of us were expecting, Paulo Fonseca to continue good work from last year to get this Lille side really, really humming. They've held on to, Jonathan David, at least for the time being. They're a side that, I think we're starting to expect a little bit more from. Are we going to see that against Monaco?
I mean, yeah, I think Fonseca has been trying to downplay that a little bit. I think he's cut a bit of a frustrated figure in his pre-match press conferences recently, saying that he doesn't feel as though he's sufficiently backed in the transfer window, that his team are actually weaker now than they were last season. I think, keeping players like Jonathan David, who were very much expected to have left, I think that can only be kind of a huge positive for Lille. But yeah, not everything is very merry there, and he's talking about not being able to necessarily compete with your Monacos and your PSGs, and I don't really see why they can't compete with maybe not PSG, but at least your Marseilles and your Monacos, because it's a big club. Yeah, they're flattering to deceive. I think that the Faroe Islands trip was a bit of a low point. I think that was the first point ever received by a team from the Faroe Islands in European competition, handed to them on a plate by Lille, who, as a mitigating circumstance, they were actually resting lots of players for that game against Lens, and that almost paid off because I thought that they did look quite impressive against Lens, but they're dreadfully inconsistent. Perfectly capable of getting a draw against Lens, who do look revitalised now, I think it's fair to say, but also capable of being hammered by Lorient. This is a very, very inconsistent side this year. Who knows? You're talking about having to look into the kind of crystal ball, and it feels like that you're doing that every single week with Lille, because and you're not seeing anything too clearly, because every week you can predict one thing and it can be wildly the other way. So yeah, hard to see and hard to know which Lille team will turn up for that Monaco clash. And I think, given Monaco's form, I think you'd back them to potentially win that, although I do think that over time Lille will look at least a little bit more solid with Umtiti kind of bedding in, and the very, very promising Lenny Yoro of seen next to him as well. I think that there is the makings of a really, really strong centre-back partnership. So I think it's a team that maybe will start to hit its stride as the season progresses.
You are listening to Luke Entwistle, Jonathan Johnson, myself, Robbie Thomson. That's it for today's episode of Le Beau Jeu. Don't forget to get involved in the conversation on X. It always sounds weird, still sounds weird saying that. Let's just call it Twitter for another little while. At Ligue 1 _ENG for English, Ligue 1 _ENG for English. Of course, you can find the podcast, subscribe, give us a rating, 5 stars preferred, tell your friends, recommend us, and get everyone listening to Le Beau Jeu. And of course, you can catch everything that moves every day of the week on Ligue1.com. We will be back in 2 weeks' time with a review of all the action in rounds 9 and 10, looking ahead to 11 and 12. We are past the quarter-way mark of the season already, and it's Monaco leading the way. We're going to take our look back at the history with our latest episode of Ligue 1 Legends and who won the league. I think we're probably up to a certain Paris Saint-Germain's first title win or thereabouts, or the beginning of their incredible run as well. We'll be looking for the next international bright young thing in our young player profiles, and plenty more as well. JJ, thank you for joining us.
Thanks a lot. Always a pleasure, and look forward to the next one.
Luke, you too. Enjoy the Riviera and the South Coast?
Merci beaucoup. The weather is turning, not too much more to enjoy. I think we're going to be quite Parisian weather here, pretty soon, I'm afraid.
Aye. Well, it is a winter sport. We love getting rugged up and going to the football as well. Thank you for joining us from me, Robbie Thomson, and all the team here, producer Stephen, and all our contributors, Andreas Evagora as well. We'll see you again in 2 weeks' time. Au revoir.
Oh my word, what a goal! Golovin! Lovely finish! Ajax delivery, Gendouzi's header! Here's an opportunity, Sanchez! Outrageous goal